My rent in Williston, North Dakota was more than double what I was paying in New York City. Half of journalism is just answering questions, digging into the hard truths, helping to shine light on areas that people don't want to be seen or that people don't understand. If this energy transition is going to happen, it's going to touch every single part of our everyday lives.
Tens of thousands of journalists. Not all of them write Amazon #1 books.
Teague Egan is tall and jaunty, with dirty blonde hair that could reach to his ears if styled straight, but is matted over his head with gel or mousse or some other hairstyling product.
He talks with a slow, purposeful drawl that evokes his native South Florida and adopted Southern Californian accent. Some have called it Valley Girl speak. Do I really talk like a Valley Girl?
No, it's a mixture of Florida and Cali for sure.
Welcome to XTRAordinary, the most extraordinary podcast in the world.
There we go.
That's right.
Where we get the opportunity to chat with people that make their own rules.
Okay.
Ernest Scheyder, thanks for joining, buddy.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
You drove here from Houston yesterday and you're flying to Vegas today.
I am.
For your bachelor party.
I am, yes. All over the map.
Ernest says that you're the only one he would pause his bachelor party celebration for to do this, so...
You guys a lot, buddy.
Yeah, let's go.
I mean, he has the power of persuasion. What can I say?
That's fair.
He was originally not going to do it.
Okay.
And I called him up. I was like, dude, you got to come promote the book.
Yeah.
Promote the book.
That's fair.
You know.
I mean, any conversation about lithium is a good conversation.
It is. It is. So before we get to the book, we're going to talk a lot about the book.
Sure.
Your main job is that you're one of the preeminent journalists for Reuters, covering the energy transition.
Part of the big team, but yeah.
And, you know, I'll never forget this, that when you started writing about EnergyX, you asked me that whenever I have big news, if I would give it to you first. And believe it or not, you're the only journalist who has ever asked me to do that.
Really? Okay.
And I think the lesson that I got out of that is about the power of asking.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't get what you don't ask for.
I think journalism, like as in life, is all about relationships. And I think you're right. It's all about asking and having those connections. So yeah, I think that's important.
So how'd you get into journalism?
Gosh, it's a long story. I started my high school newspaper, actually, and which is just as dorky and nerdy as it sounds. And then in college, I did the college newspaper and started interning at the local newspaper. And then after college, I decided to go to grad school for journalism. And I went to New York. And then I got a job in business journalism right before this very small bank called Bear Stearns collapsed.
Yep.
And so that was the first 2 years of my career. And then that was obviously a crazy time to be in business journalism and to chronicle what was going on in that big upheaval in our global financial services industry. And then I started to get interested in energy. And at the time, the shale boom was taking off, kind of in its infancy. And I started to cover oil and gas and joined Reuters in 2009 and got to cover the initial stages of that shale boom, really, and looking at places across New York and Pennsylvania that were experiencing huge growth because of this. And then in 2014, Reuters came with me with an offer I couldn't refuse. They said, "Why don't you move to North Dakota?" I probably lost a bet or something, but it was a great opportunity.
They made you move to North Dakota.
Yes, yeah. Made / ask / why don't you go to North Dakota?
I've been to North Dakota.
I've never been to North Dakota.
It's got a ton of oil, which is why I went there. And at the time in 2014, it was the fastest growing economy in the world. My rent in Williston, North Dakota was more than double what I was paying in New York City.
Really?
It was all just supply and demand.
What was the town in North Dakota?
Williston, North Dakota. It's on the far western edge, right on the
population 650.
So it initially was about 15,000 and it swelled to about 50,000 due to the boom. That's just in the town's border. Great opportunity, awesome chance to report on a huge part of the global economy, really. And at the time, North Dakota was producing more oil than some OPEC countries. And so the huge clout on the global stage. And then after about 2 years in North Dakota, I decided I wanted to change. And so I went to Houston and I wrote about Exxon and Chevron and OPEC. Great opportunity, did that for 2 years. And then in 2018, I switched to writing about critical minerals because I got curious about lithium and copper and all these other building blocks for lithium-ion batteries and other electronic devices. And I wanted to know where we were actually going to get these building blocks.
Wait, what was like your kind of aha moment, or when did you? I mean, that's a pretty drastic kind of switch from somebody who's reporting on oil and gas to then say, I want to go cover this other kind of completely different thing in renewable energy.
Well, I don't know if it's that radical. I think the energy umbrella is pretty broad. And if the economy was moving slowly in that direction, which it was, and very rapidly now, I think questions about where we're going to actually get these building blocks matter. And half of journalism is just answering questions, digging into the hard truths, helping to shine light on areas that people don't want to be seen or that people don't understand. And so I think oil and gas has been well understood. It's been around for 100, 150 years. It's a fascinating industry, but I was curious about, okay, well, where is the technology, where are the people, where is the money going in this critical mineral sphere? Because especially in the United States, which even still, as we sit here today in 2024, is producing very little of these critical minerals. Think back 6 years ago, it was producing even less. And so that even sparked further questions about the geopolitics around all of this. I covered OPEC, like I was saying. People love, especially in the United States, to malign OPEC. But if we were transitioning to a need for more lithium, and the United States only produced less than 5,000 metric tons a year, well, then aren't they just setting themselves up to rely on a lithium OPEC? Sort of questions like this I was thinking through.
Will there be a lithium OPEC?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the president of Bolivia has said he wants one, and the president of Mexico has said that he wants one. How that'll actually work, I have questions about.
Have you talked to the president of Bolivia or the president of Mexico?
Have I directly talked to them? No. But my colleagues have.
So I feel like, you're one of the lead journalists of Reuters, which is a top tier publication, right? Covering the whole energy transition from your beat. You must get to talk to a lot of cool people.
Well, so I'm part of our global team, and so we all get to talk, thankfully, to a part of our global we get to talk to a lot of interesting people, such as Teague Egan, CEO of EnergyX. And, I think most importantly, we're stand-ins for our audience to help them understand what's going on in the world and the complexities that are out there. And so you do get the opportunity to talk to investors, to policymakers, to regulators, to a whole host of people that are reshaping. And when it comes to this energy transition, what they say matters, and I think helps people understand the world around them.
Who are some of the coolest people that you've had the chance to speak with? Any presidents?
Biden? Yeah. He's great. I got to, last month, speaking of lithium, I got to talk to Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. She is trying to usher in this big lithium boom for her state, which sits on top of the Smackover, this big reserve of lithium. And so she is making a big push to have this happen. And
Arkansas is, of course, where Exxon just purchased
correct
a huge lithium reserve for over 100 million.
Right. Yeah. So Exxon's made a huge bet on direct lithium extraction technology. That's been obviously a major vote of confidence in this very nascent space. Obviously,
I'm very excited to see whose technology they choose.
Yes. Maybe we can get into that later in the conversation.
Maybe.
Spencer and I will press you on what you're hearing.
So when you're talking about the energy transition, does that specifically mean to electric, or what is it? Is it in general? Is it just from fossil fuels to any renewable energy? What do you mean by the transition?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I think it means different things to different people. I think broadly, though, when people say the energy transition, they do mean sort of a decrease in the use of oil and gas and an increase in products powered by critical minerals and materials like lithium or copper or nickel. And what that means, I think, depends on different parts of the world. I think certain parts of the world will have more oil usage for the foreseeable future than other parts. And I think it also depends on the availability of these critical minerals. I think at its core, it relies on the Paris Climate Accord agreements, which said we're striving for global net zero climate emissions by 2050. I think some parts of the world are able to get there faster than others. And it all comes back to how much of these materials are you going to be able to produce? We'll see.
So your job is breaking cool stories.
That's my main job, yeah.
which is a pretty cool job. What, like, do you have is it all the same to you, or do you like get a high when you find out like something that nobody else knows that you get to tell to the rest of the world?
I mean, yeah, I think any journalist would tell you that there is a high from breaking news. And so getting it out there and helping people understand the world. And I think what's fascinating about the critical mineral space is because it's such an opaque and confusing space right now, and people don't fully understand it, helping them to understand it as I learn it is satisfying because people get to understand a complex space that they hadn't before. I mean, part of the book is me helping average people to really, really grapple with what are the choices that we have to be thinking through. And I find that very professionally satisfying because if we don't think through these complex areas, then we have to be comfortable with places in the world supplying these building blocks that might not share certain ESG values that we all hold dear, or might use these materials as economic weapons. And helping people better to grapple with those complexities, I find very satisfying professionally.
Do you think that they are economic weapons?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Whoever controls lithium and copper and nickel and cobalt will control the 21st century economy. There's no doubt about that.
I know a company that's working on that. So you just wrote a book. You've gone from incredible journalist to now renowned author.
Well, thank you.
The War Below. You're actually the first author that we've had on the show.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm glad for that honor.
This is a cool book. Tell me about the process in writing the book.
Yeah, the process really started initially when I was living in North Dakota way back when. I started to explore how people think about oil and gas and these trade-offs. And we were discussing about implicitly people have strong reactions to oil or gas. And so you typically fall into one or two camps. Yes, oil is great and it's so important for the global economy, or no, I don't think that oil is important and oil companies are evil. But with critical minerals, I started to see people have a different reaction. 9 out of 10 people, I would say, that I would interview would say, sure, I love critical minerals. Sounds great, more lithium, beautiful. But the tension point became around, okay, where are we going to get those? And it then even got even more tense when you say, okay, now we're going to put a mine in your backyard. So therein lies the rub. Like, people don't necessarily want to make the tough choices around where we get these building blocks. And so I wanted the book to explore that narrative. I wanted it to tell readers who the people are, because this is not a book for geologists or investors. It's about the people that live on the front lines of this transition. People like Teague, who is in one of the chapters. People like...
We'll get to that chapter. but like
short tease. But
we'll dive into the book. But like, my question, I guess, is that there are thousands and thousands of journalists, or tens of thousands of journalists. Not all of them write Amazon #1 books. How'd you decide? Like, this is impressive, dude. Like, how'd you decide to write a book? How does one? I've thought about writing a book, but I haven't done it yet. How you have a book deal with the biggest publisher?
You don't have no free time. I don't have free time either. But
well, you're gonna write my bio. My
There we go. We go. I mean, I think it really got down to that. I was so focused on really helping people understand this transition. And I wanted people to see the humans that are on the front lines. Like I said, this is not a book for geologists or investors. This is a book for everyone that is listening, all your family members, your crazy cousin Bob at Thanksgiving dinner, your aunt in Iowa. Like, these are stories for everyone. And I wanted to humanize these issues because I think especially we in the United States, especially other sides of people, oh gosh, I don't agree with that person, so I other them. And I wanted people to see that there's multiple perspectives on especially extractive projects. And I wanted them to see that these are human beings that live on all sides of these issues. And here's what makes them tick and talk. Like, a great example is I spend the longest chapter in the book looking at the Resolution Copper Project in Arizona, which has been strongly opposed by Native American communities because this mine would destroy a site of religious and cultural value that's been passed down through the people through generations. But you also have a community that wants the mine open for jobs, a community of largely Hispanic people that the median income is $20,000 a year, and the mine is promising a median income of $100,000 a year. And then you've got the...
So when I was reading that chapter, that was actually a really interesting chapter where, Arizona, US, they're trying to put a huge copper mine, and it's two of the biggest copper companies in the world, Rio Tinto and BHP, who are also partnered on currently the biggest copper mine in the world in Chile. but you have this like tribunal site where they think that there's like religious spirits and stuff. But the mayor, or it was the mayor of the town,
correct, yes.
said that like that didn't exist 10 years ago when there was no talk about a copper mine. And then all of a sudden now it's like, oh, you can't destroy this site.
Yeah.
Do you have like, you're the one that went down there and checked it out. Like,
so I didn't, it was important for me to include her perspectives as well as that of the San Carlos Apache people, as well as that of the mining companies. I didn't feel that it was my place in the book to bring my perspective as to whether or not the mayor was right, the tribe was right, the company was right. I wanted the reader to grapple with those tough issues for her or himself.
what is your perspective on XTRAordinary?
I actually met
that's
pains.
interesting.
I'm actually at pains here not to have my opinion. I think my opinion matters far less than the reader really wrestling with these. And so does the reader think that this area is sacred or not? And even if it is sacred, is the reader okay with it being dug up for its copper? Like, these are things that we've got to be grappling with. Sure, I could say to the reader, this is what my perspective is, and here is the stance I'm taking. But I don't think that would help the reader at all grapple with what I think is the sticky middle here that they really need to be going through.
I think that's good journalism, though, as well. It's like present the situation and let people kind of deduce for themselves what's going on.
Right. I basically don't give the reader an out. I say, you have to do the work. And the one argument that I bring to the reader here, the one question that I say is, what are the choices you're willing to make? And I say, you have to be grappling with these choices, because indecision is a choice as well.
You present that kind of like both sides throughout the whole book, right? There's so that one is like, okay, what's more important, this site or the future cars? I think, what was the one in the first chapter? I think there was like a toss up there too.
Yeah, the main spine of the book, which is 3 chapters, including the first chapter, revolves around the Rhyolite Ridge Lithium project in
the flower.
The flower, right. This is about 200 miles.
Tell us about the flower.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so there's a site about 200 miles north of Las Vegas that is the home to this rare flower found nowhere else on the planet. It's called Teague's buckwheat. And the flower loves this deposit of lithium that's underneath the roots. It's a major, major deposit of lithium as well as boron. And there's a company that would love to develop this lithium and has been trying for many, many years to do it. But on the other side of the coin here is a conservation group that is protected and taken up the cause of this rare flower. And you discover through the book how the tension between both the company and the conservation group centers around this flower and the lithium. And then you also have 2 different approaches by the US government. One arm that decides whether or not the flower should be declared endangered, and the other is deciding whether or not to give the mining company a loan of more than $700 million. And at its core, really, I was fascinated by this because it brought up issues of biodiversity, of climate change, of choice. If we develop the mine and the flower goes extinct, is that a loss? If we don't develop the mine and leave the flower there, would the flower just go extinct due to climate change? Can the flower and the mine coexist together? I mean, what are the choices that we're willing to make? And the conservation group would say, if we let this flower go extinct due to the mine, then what's next? Is it a tree? Is it an animal? Is it a fish? Is it maybe just tearing up your neighborhood so we can get the metals underneath it? I mean, these are the choices. It sounds like a slippery slope argument, but at its core, it's an issue that we've got to grapple with.
Right.
I think there's slipperier slopes than that.
Yeah, there's a lot of slippery slopes.
But I hear the argument, but I just got to say that's ridiculous. A flower? You got
A lot of people share your opinion.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I hear the argument. You know.
Have you always been a good storyteller? I feel like my best friends that are great storytellers, I watch a lot of their content in social media. I'm like, these guys are just journalists. This is amazing. And then vice versa, great journalists tend to be really good storytellers. Has that always come natural to you? And also, you know, if your goal is to spread this to the masses, have you thought about maybe turning it into maybe a biopic, or I mean a documentary, a movie, something that people could just watch as well?
So I think good
When's the movie deal coming?
I'm hoping we're going to push it. I think good storytelling depends on good, what we call shoe leather journalism. That is sort of getting out and actually pounding the pavement and talking to people. And I think one thing you see in the book is I go to all of these places in the book on purpose. Like I go to Arizona, I meet with the San Carlos Apache. You know, I spent I spent a lot of time in Nevada going to two proposed lithium projects that are there. I drove to northern Idaho and talk about a stibnite in a gold mine, proposed mine there.
Sounds like you should have been vlogging this.
There is some video stuff, yeah. And there's a lot of stuff online. Check out my Twitter. I got a lot of stuff on there.
Cool.
The Twitter plug. What's the Twitter?
At Ernest Scheyder. Yeah.
There we go.
Ernest Scheyder. Let's go.
What do we call it? X now? I don't know.
Yeah.
X/Twitter. And so I think it really, to tell good stories, you've got to get out there and you've got to meet with people. You got to try to get all sides of a story and just get a sense of place and scale. And in the book, it was really important to me to have that sense of place and scale, to be able to tell those stories accurately and responsibly.
Don't forget your trip down to Bolivia.
Bolivia was one of the most epic trips of the book, and Bolivia's got the world's largest lithium resource, which sounds like technical jargon, but basically it's got crap ton of lithium there.
We went down to Bolivia together.
Epic.
And
Yes.
EnergyX had a pilot plant down there that we were working with the Bolivian government to try to help them extract their lithium from the biggest lithium reserve in the world.
Yes.
So we had our pilot plant down there for 6 months. So it was running 24/7, and Ernie asked to come down and write a chapter in the book.
Cool.
So he came down. We went to Potosi, which is kind of like one of the states in the South, and we were donating to like some of the schools and stuff in the region there. Did this big ceremony, and then he came to see the pilot. And I have to say, the book is written in a very different way than you write your articles.
Okay.
Do you not feel that way?
Well, I feel like I definitely had a lot more real estate here to write. I mean, with Reuters, with my day job, we don't always have as much room to tell broader stories. I had the real estate here, and I wanted to be able to do that.
Like my perspective, I think that when I read articles on Reuters that you're doing, they're like news articles.
Right.
In this, you're telling like an incredible story. It's really storytelling.
Correct. Yeah. And
which is riveting for the reader.
Well, I wanted that sense of tension, obviously to move it forward here. And, the reason that Bolivia and EnergyX is towards the back of the book is because during the whole front of the book, we're having the reader debate, okay, gosh, we need more lithium, we need more copper and nickel, but are there places too special to mine? Are there places where we should allow mining? And then we get exploring direct lithium extraction. And so it was important for me to actually talk to a company that actually is pushing to advance DLE and to say, okay, cool, like we have a technology that we feel can help lessen on some of those tough choices and to go through some of the realities of that. And if we're not going to have a quote unquote hole in the ground, or we're not going to have giant evaporation ponds, but we're going to use DLE, what are some of the hurdles that go along with that? And I wanted the reader to help guide them through those tough choices.
You really go deep on my hairdo.
It's a beautiful hairdo.
Do you want to read this, or do you
Teague's
want
hair is in your book?
Teague's hair is in the book.
What page is our chapter on here?
I'll read it.
Do you want to read it?
I will do a read.
That.
I mean, there we go. All right. Do you want to read this, or
Yeah, give it to the man.
okay? Yeah, I'll let you read it.
Hear it from the source.
Honestly, I couldn't read it without laughing when it's on the first page. You talk about
All right.
The war below.
Teague Egan is tall and jaunty, with dirty blonde hair that could reach to his ears if styled straight, but is matted over his head with gel or mousse or some other hairstyling product.
I'm buying it.
really.
The ends sometimes point nearly straight back, just past his whirl, as if his head were perpetually caught in a wind tunnel, and the last bits of hair froze slightly out of flow in defiance of intention.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see.
J.R.R. Tolkien's going to go out of business.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Frodo is not going to the Shire with his haircut, but
You missed he talks with the slow, purposeful drawl that evokes his native South Florida and adopted Southern Californian accent. Some have called it Valley Girl speak. That got me, brother. That got me.
Now I know the book's true, so I'm going to really absorb everything.
Do I really talk like a Valley Girl?
No, it's a mixture of Florida and Cali for
we
sure.
We have a vote of confidence from someone from Teague's high school years. So
Yeah.
I feel validated.
Yeah, for sure. This is great.
Because a lot of people think I have a California accent, But did I have that from Florida? Like,
No, he's
'cause I
always had it.
talk
Yeah,
like a Valley girl.
he's
All
always
right,
had it.
all right.
He's always had it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Now I know you only write facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the book is filled with descriptions of that of various people like Teague in order to give a sense of humanity, really, and to let people walk through the experience with me, so they feel like they're there. And I think it was important to show that journey when Teague and Kelly and the other EnergyX team goes to the Potosi leadership and talks about the partnership that they wanted to make with them. And I think that gives a sense of the effort that this company is making to grow in Bolivia. And so you get a sense of what goes on there, and it's complex, right? I mean, I think Teague can say, obviously it's not easy, but the whole first part of the book, remember, we're saying, okay, we need these critical minerals. Holes in the ground and evaporation ponds are tough. And so I think too often people are like, oh, cool, a technology can save us. That's easy. And it's not just like flipping a switch, as I'm sure Teague can attest, as that chapter shows.
That chapter.
It's not flipping a switch. And like, it was obviously exciting for us to win that pilot plant down in Bolivia.
Mm.
And that was the first time that as a company, EnergyX was able to put a real physical thing like a pilot plant into live operating conditions.
Right.
But what I didn't foresee coming was all of the geopolitical havoc that is in Bolivia. Like, we won that pilot bid back in 2021. We put the pilot plant in 2022, first half of 2022. And here we are at the beginning of 2024. We didn't win the commercial contract. They gave it to a Chinese and a Russian company. But here we are at the beginning of 2024, and they just issued another tender because it didn't work. And there's just all this like infighting within the country. And it's like, operating in those parts of the world is sometimes tough. But from what it sounds like, based on some of these stories you're talking about in Nevada, it can be just as tough here.
Sure. I think the United States also have a collective grappling with what are the rules. I mean, the law for mining in the Western United States has been around since 1872. Ulysses S. Grant signed it.
Wait, what law?
A hard rock mining law in the Western United States has been around since 1872.
What's the law?
The law broadly oversees and governs hard rock mining in the Western United States, and it was designed to increase the population of the U.S. West. As you both know, living in California, there's a lot of people now in the U.S. West, so the law has had its intended effect. The law also lets hard rock mining companies pay zero in royalties to taxpayers, me and you, and the U.S. federal government. Oil and gas companies operating on federal land have to pay royalties. So I can tell you right now.
How much royalty do they pay?
I think it's 8%, but don't quote me. I'd have to triple check that. In any event, oil companies would kill to pay nothing, obviously.
Yeah.
But copper companies, lithium companies operating on U.S. federal land pay nothing. And that is a huge point of contention. Environmental groups, conservation groups want to change that. But there's no, will right now in Washington collectively to do that. So that's part of the conversation as well here. It's also just confusing how you get a mining permit for federal land in the United States. Where do you start?
Yeah. Is that more clear for oil and gas? Like where to get the permit for that?
Well, I would say it's clearer in that it can be a little, so the operations are different, right? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify, but with oil and gas, you put a straw in the ground and you don't necessarily have to just put it in one spot. Maybe you can move it a little farther down. But with lithium or copper or any of these other critical minerals, I mean, they are where they are.
You're digging up the ground.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go a mile down the road.
Right.
You've got to do it where you...
They are where they are.
You've got it.
So is there a balance to which one is better for the environment immediately? And is there a reason? What are the reasons why it's so divisive?
Because the short answer is nobody wants a mine in their backyard. I mean, and I sort of get that. And the longer term benefits come that you can recycle these critical minerals, right? Once you burn off oil and gas in an internal combustion engine, it's gone obviously forever and it's contributed to climate change. But copper can be recycled over and over and over again. Lithium can. There is a chapter in the book that looks at different recycling attempts by two companies specifically, Redwood and Li-Cycle, and they each have different approaches. One of the biggest structural impediments to recycling actually has little to do with tech, although that is an impediment, but actually do with transportation. That's the biggest logistical hurdle and financial hurdle because think about like an old battery and think about transporting 1,000 of those on like a rail car across the country. They're obviously all filled with charge. Even if it's 1%, then 1% times 1,000, and then the potential if one of those.
You're saying it's not safe.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah. If one of those explodes and then you've got a chain reaction over 1,000 others, then you've got a big fire, and then you can obviously see why there's a high risk. And so you have high insurance premiums, et cetera, et cetera. So the more we have the more we would have recycling facilities, the easier I would think it would be for recycling. We also have to encourage a broader focus among the average person. I'm sure you guys have drawers at your houses filled with old cell phones. I know I do.
Yeah, I do.
And just magnify that now across all the other electronic gadgets and gizmos that we use every single day in our lives, not to mention electric vehicles.
Right.
I have a chapter in the book about leaf blowers, which sounds sort of whimsy and basic, but I wanted people to see that this is about so much more than just transportation, much more than electric vehicles. If this energy transition is going to happen, it's going to touch every single part of our everyday lives. And so the leaf blower example came when I got a house a few years ago and decided to go all in on electric lawn care. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live the suburban dream. But I was writing this book. And so I said, I'm going to get an electric lawnmower and an electric weed whacker and yes, an electric leaf blower, and decided to, instead of buying a 2-stroke engine, because everybody says on the internet they're horrible, places like Washington, D.C. and California are banning them, I got an electric one. But then I was like, okay, well, where did the lithium come from in this lithium ion battery?
Right.
Where did the copper come from? Like, where did the nickel come from? I couldn't figure out where any of these critical minerals came from. And I got a lot of resources at my disposal in my day job at Reuters, and I just couldn't. And so that's just a leaf blower.
The leaf blower was your aha moment?
The leaf blower was the aha moment, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so we all should own leaf blowers, I mean.
So I bought a leaf blower when I moved to Austin.
Okay.
And
electric or 2-stroke?
Well, I didn't really realize, I bought it on Amazon, and I just got the one that said Amazon selected favorite or something.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And it got to the house, and it was a plug-in, and I couldn't even blow the leaves.
I remember those. I used to have one of those.
Yeah, because the cord wasn't
You need
long
an extension cord wherever you're going.
It was
it's very off-brand, Teague. I feel like CEO
I know. Well, I didn't really
company.
realize that it was a plug-in when I bought it.
Must have been a while ago.
It was before he founded EnergyX.
Yeah.
I've had the gamut of leaf blowers.
Oh, you've had multiple. Okay.
I've had multiple.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you electric now?
I had the gas leaf blower.
Okay.
Very strong.
Yes.
Stinks. Smells for sure. And then I got an electric one.
Okay.
Wasn't quite as good. But now I feel like I can only find the electric ones because they're just as good.
Right.
They're much more powerful than they used to be.
Right.
And I had the corded one, and I had the same problem. It would unplug.
Going back to your point, though, which is like a really important point, that a lot of people don't think about where stuff comes from.
Right.
And because I had the same revelation. When I founded EnergyX, the founding story was that I was down in Bolivia on a trip, just backpacking through this salt flat called Uyuni, and the world's largest salt flat. And when I found out it was the world's largest lithium reserve, that was my aha moment when I realized that I had never actually thought about where the battery in my Tesla came from.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think about where things like, this ceramic comes from, or where like the materials that make our clothes or like the things in everyday life come from.
Right.
And that is essentially what your book is about.
Yes. Yeah. It's helping people understand that Teslas don't grow on trees. They most definitely do not. I mean, it's got so many moving parts in there. And one of the biggest important parts, of course, is the lithium inside of there. And the supply chains now, they're just so crazy. Just think about this. Like the Tesla that you own, Teague, the lithium came out of the ground in northern Chile in the Atacama Desert, where there are 2 companies operating right now, Albemarle and SQM, 2 of the world's largest lithium companies. That lithium is lightly processed, sent to the coast, shipped across the Pacific Ocean, where it's processed further, most likely in China, put into a cathode, then maybe shipped to Japan, but then definitely shipped back across the Pacific Ocean to the Gigafactory in Nevada, where it's put into a battery that makes its way into your Tesla. And here we are in Austin right now.
Yeah.
That's twice across the Pacific Ocean for lithium. Now, if we had more lithium production in the United States, what would that look like in terms of actually helping the planet? Because if people buy an electric vehicle and the the implicit promise is that you're actually doing better things for the environment, well, then shipping that lithium across the Pacific Ocean twice doesn't really sound like it's a great benefit for the environment. On top of that, it can be disrupted by a weather event, by a natural disaster, by war. So I think we're starting to see a trend towards regionalization and more focus on where these building blocks come from. But we still have that tension around, okay, are we going to be mining more in Nevada, for instance?
Yeah. I mean, there are mines in the U.S., right?
Sure.
But what's
There's only one lithium mine.
one lithium mine, right? There's some copper mines.
Yes, Arizona and New Mexico have copper mines. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about the IRA, right? The IRA is, I hope everybody watching this knows what the IRA is, but for those that don't,
it's not the Irish Republican Army.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not the Irish. The Inflation Reduction Act, right? I think it was over a $1.2 trillion piece of legislation.
We're still figuring that out.
Yeah. However big it is, it's certainly been like a boost in the arm for the energy transition in the U.S.
Yes.
And even us, it's caused us to take a more serious look at producing lithium domestically in the United States.
Yes.
From your perspective, what has the IRA done for companies trying to produce supply chain in the U.S.?
I mean, at its center, the IRA is a national security bill. It's designed to increase domestic production of these critical minerals. And remember, when it was signed, Russia had just invaded Ukraine. So this came in the months after that. And so it's designed to really help drill down, if you forgive the pun, on ways to increase U.S. production of these critical minerals. It gives a tax credit for EV makers that produce a certain amount of their electric vehicle using U.S.-made critical minerals. The bill also had a realization that the U.S. does not have all these minerals within its borders, and so it looks to ally countries as well that have free trade deals with the United States. And so countries like Chile and Australia do have U.S. free trade deals. And so in that regard, it's been a success because it's encouraged more domestic mining projects. It's encouraged creativity, like in direct lithium extraction. You're starting to see companies like General Motors invest in direct lithium extraction, as obviously as Teague knows, as well as in traditional mining, like with Lithium Americas and Thacker Pass, and other companies, doing their own investments focused in the U.S. or in other ally countries. There's still some questions on how it's actually going to be developed and deployed. A great example is Argentine lithium. Argentina does not have a U.S. free trade deal. And so if lithium comes out of the ground in Argentina and is processed in, say, the United States, is that IRA compliant? Depends on who you talk to. It's still confusing.
Isn't there a limit, like so much of the processing has to be done, or like the substance needs to change format like so much for it to become compliant?
To get the tax credit, the percentage of the vehicle made with IRA compliant material does change. It does increase over time, yes. And Treasury is still working through, the Department of the Treasury is still working through what percentage needs to be processed and at what geographic point in the supply chain.
Didn't I think I read yesterday, it might have been one of your articles, that GM just lost like a huge amount of subsidy because their batteries weren't IRA compliant. Do you see that?
I think that was Volkswagen.
Was it Volkswagen?
I have to triple check, but GM did get big news yesterday. The Department of Energy gave the Thacker Pass project a $2.26 billion loan.
Yeah. Which is one of GM's big investments.
Correct.
GM has $650 million in that.
They're the largest shareholder in Lithium Americas, yes.
Yeah. So that could be huge. How much lithium is there?
It's the largest deposit in North America. And so they have identified this Thacker Pass deposit, but Thacker Pass is part of something bigger called the McDermott caldera, which is basically just a really old volcano. And a lot of lithium is found near old volcanoes. And so the potential there is much bigger than even what they think in Thacker Pass, which is already the biggest deposit in North America. So I don't have a hard number for you. I didn't just say it's very big.
Yeah. When do you see that project getting built?
They want it to be open by 2028.
Exciting.
So we'll see. We'll see.
That's
and I do visit Thacker Pass in the book, and you get to see the site through the eyes of a key opposition figure and figure out sort of what makes him tick.
Who's the opposition figure for Thacker Pass?
There's a guy named Max Wilbert who's part of a group called Protect Thacker Pass. He's also part of an environmental organization called Deep Green Lies, and he advocates for actually a de-industrialization. So as we were talking about at the top of the conversation about how increasingly so much of our everyday lives are electric, he's actually saying we should get rid of all of this stuff, get rid of electric vehicles, get rid of vehicles, period. People should grow their own food. We should go back to an agrarian way of life as a way to stem climate change. And he would say that the way to fight rising temperatures globally is not to have more electronic gadgets. It's to actually decrease all of this industrialization that's occurred the past 200 years. And I included him on purpose in the book because while it might sound fringe to me or you, sitting here surrounded by lights and talking into microphones,
with cell phones.
Cell phones.
Does he live in like a cave?
He does use electronics and technology.
Okay.
And torches.
So he's a hypocrite.
He sees them as a means to an end. And I explore it in the book because I wanted people to understand what makes him tick. But it's not a fringe idea anymore. It's getting traction and it's out there. People are actually thinking through this in some circles.
How do we know certain sacrifices that we're being asked to make today actually help in, 100 years from now?
That's a good question. And also I would push back and say, who's being asked to sacrifice? Are me and you being asked to sacrifice, or is it people that are being asked to sacrifice their ancestral land or have a giant hole in their backyard or have the ceremony in cemeteries where their ancestors are buried, dug up? Like, so
many different sacrifices.
So many sacrifices right now. And I think in the United States for too long, we've been exporting the production of the goods and the building blocks for everyday lives to places we'll never go and people will never meet. And I think part of the transition is a necessary reckoning with the reality that these issues are tough, but we've got to be producing more of them at home and facing the reality of the building blocks of our everyday lives. We do it to a certain extent with oil and gas. The U.S. is the world's largest oil producer right now. It produces more oil than at any point in history. But, when's the last time you went to an oil field, even though we're sitting in Texas right now?
I see them when I fly in, all those little dots on the ground or little oil
flares.
Yeah.
Literally burning money, but it's a different conversation.
So the U.S. produces more oil than out in Saudi?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. A lot.
Yeah, that's all due to fracking. Yeah.
Okay. So talking about a different kind of energy, it takes a lot of energy to run a marathon, and you've done several of them.
I have, yeah.
What's that like? I've done one, but I don't recommend it.
I've done one too, and I won't do another one.
Yeah, I'm done. One and done.
One and done.
I just wanted to do it.
I've done 10, and I got to say,
you've done 10 marathons?
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
That's a lot of energy.
I do New York every year to fundraise for Alzheimer's research. So
that's a good cause.
It's a cause I care about. I've done 9 New Yorks. This fall will be my 10th. So you guys should join me.
I did the LA marathon once.
I'm
how much do you raise?
Every year I raise about 4,000 or 5,000.
Let's go.
All right, I'm putting the challenge out here right now to the listeners of XTRAordinary.
All right.
You guys are both challenged.
We'll get
maybe I'll do it.
Didn't it just happen? Though?
November. It'll happen. In
November.
And it seems like yesterday, but it's 5 months ago.
It does seem like yesterday.
Cold in New York in November? It's pretty cold, huh?
It can be, depending.
So a cold marathon sounds terrible.
No, it depends. Last year it was in the 60s, which is actually too warm.
I did the LA marathon and I did not train for it.
That was
went
great.
And did it.
Why did you do that?
Actually, it's kind of a slightly sad story. A buddy of mine lost his leg.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, you know what? I'm taking my legs for granted every day. Let me just go use them.
Okay.
And like raise awareness for this. It was kind of like a micro charity. Yeah. I put the link up, but I don't know. I don't know how much.
Yeah, but you have a big
raised.
following, so you probably got a little bit of money.
Got a little in there, but more importantly, I used my legs, and the next day I felt like I got hit by a train.
Yeah.
I don't recommend doing marathons without training for it. For sure.
I did the Boston Marathon with minimal training.
Okay.
And that was I experienced the same thing.
Yeah, minimal training also not recommended.
Yeah, it was. I ended up having to like basically crawl the last 7 miles.
But you finished.
I finished.
That's all that matters.
I limped the last 2 miles.
Sub 6 hours.
That's for sure. Sub 6.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, how fast do you run in these marathons?
4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Good.
All right.
All you got to do is finish.
It's
right?
a marathon.
I'm not going to the Olympics.
Yeah. And you've done triathlons as well.
I have. Yeah.
That's wild. I've wanted to do that.
Yeah, I did it when I lived in New York. I did the New York Triathlon a few times, but you swim in the Hudson, which is nasty.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the book for a moment. So tell me about what a book deal looks like. You're signed to the biggest publisher. Like, did you get an advance or like, and how's the book doing?
It's been received really, really well on Amazon.
Number one on the mining and energy charts.
Yep. Natural extraction.
Epic.
The publisher is Simon & Schuster's One Signal, so very thankful for their partnership and great to be working with them. And they're focused on serious nonfiction, which is
Can people go in bookstores and buy it? Or
you can buy it anywhere. Yeah, and we'll launch in the United Kingdom next month.
Like your local Borders.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that still a thing? Barnes and Nobles?
Barnes and Nobles.
I think Borders is sadly gone, but
Borders is gone. Yeah.
But Barnes and Noble still lives with us. Yeah.
Okay.
Amazon's out there. I'm a big fan of independent bookstores, so support your independent bookstore. We had a big launch in Houston at Brazos Bookstore, one of the best independent bookstores in the country. So so it's out there. And so it's, it's a business at the end of the day, right? Publishing is a business. So, when you sell, when people buy a copy, it's shared obviously with the author.
How much do you make per book?
Gosh, I'd have to look it up off the top of my head, but I'll get back
and
to
you. Is this your first book?
It's my first book.
And how does that feel? You went in and then you wrote for 2 years and now you got your own book in your hand.
Write?
The actual writing took a little less time because I wanted to go back out and to see all the places that I hadn't been to before or revisit them. And so I would say 2022, like every single weekend, every spare minute, every vacation, I was writing or visiting a place. And then the last month of 2022, I just buckled down and finished what I hadn't written before. I will say the very first chapter that I wrote was the chapter with Teague in Bolivia, because I actually started writing it in Bolivia.
So it started off as a romance novel. And then wait a minute, we got to shift.
Romance novels sell a lot, I want to sell
That's
books,
why it's doing so
well. We crushed it though. We crushed it.
Me and Teague's hair fell in love. So that's it started in Bolivia.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Exciting. Congratulations.
Are you already thinking about the next book, or like what is an author's like? You're an author now. You're not just a journalist.
Yeah, it's I want to get through this book, and writing is certainly a huge challenge, and it's great to have that done. But now it's also sort of getting it out and talking to as many different people as possible. It feels surreal to be competing with Britney Spears on the book list, but I am.
That's who your competition is.
She's got a memoir out right now.
Really?
So yeah. So
she's also in the lithium copper section.
Did you read the Britney Spears memoir?
I did.
You did?
I did.
What's tell me something about that.
Well, I let people decide for themselves, but she's had a very interesting life. So, but I love Britney Spears. I'm sort of being cute, but yeah, it's a competitive landscape. People have a choice when they come to books, and I want people to realize about the book that it's not a book about geology or mining. Like, it's about people and choice, and you get to see what makes them tick and learn about their hairdo and see them go to places like
accent,
this is all important, right? And to say these are the choices that we face as a world, and if we're not going to be having these choices, we have to be comfortable with places like China using their control as economic weapons.
Speaking of China, there's a lot of news right now about TikTok.
Yes,
and this is a very interesting kind of dynamic that I want your opinion on. So the House just passed the ban on TikTok.
Right.
And they're not calling it a ban. They're saying that they're forcing China to divest of it within 6 months, or else US-based app stores aren't allowed to distribute it, right?
Right.
One side is that, this is a free country, First Amendment rights. We can do whatever we, say whatever we want, use whatever social media we want. We don't want to be like China, who's banned Facebook and social media that the US starts. But now we're going to ban it because China's using it as a cyber weapon against us, spying on us, influencing our youth with dumb memes or, basically cat memes while their youth is getting education, math, science, STEM. What's your opinion on this?
Well, I'm not a tech reporter, so I don't know as much about the issue as others might. But what I would say is that China and other parts of the global economy has been very clear about using its control of those places as economic weapons. It has done this with rare earths, for instance. Now, rare earths are a grouping of 17 minor metals that are used to make magnets that turn power into motion. So Teague's Tesla has a giant battery that powers this rare earth magnet that turns its wheels. China is the dominant producer globally, and in 2010, it actually cut off exports to Japan for rare earths after a diplomatic spat. It's threatened to do that to the United States. It's limited the exports of other rare metals, germanium, gallium, graphite, and there's huge use for these rare earths outside of just electric vehicles. They're in night vision goggles, they're in fighter jets, they're in other weapons that the Pentagon uses. And so that's just rare earths. It also is the world's largest processor of lithium and major copper producer. And so whatever it does in these areas has huge economic influences. And Beijing knows this. And so they have strongly signaled that they're going to use that for their economic benefit. And to Teague's point, I mean, a lot of their young people are in universities right now studying many of these high-tech spaces, including mining. It's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mining engineering programs across the country. The United States has, I think, less than 15. And professors in mining engineering programs are clamoring for students. So if you guys know of any kid who's 17 or 18 that wants to go into mining or thinking about it, or even just wants a free ride and is good with math, like, have them call me and I'll connect them with these professors.
They all want to be TikTokers.
They all want to be TikTokers.
Yeah.
There's
YouTubers.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
US youth want, it's working.
Definitely working.
It's working.
Right in our face. It's true. You know.
Yeah.
And all the Chinese youth want to go be chemical engineers or mining engineers or computer scientists.
I mean, it's kind of that black and white. Yes. And so we have to be encouraging, more STEM. I mean, I sound like a PSA, but yeah, I mean, that's part of it. People need to be understanding these spaces a bit more. And I think China has signaled that it wants to use this space as economic weapons. I mean, we'll see what happens with TikTok, but I think the broader 10,000 foot view level is that China is thinking 10 steps ahead and playing 3D chess when others are not.
Yeah, China definitely puts China first, as they should, right? That's what their goal is. And where's that balance when it comes to energy? Because we can put all these, restrictions on us over here, but if they're not going to do it over there, and they're arguably the worst for the environment, are we limiting ourselves and our future potential for lowering our overall energy costs, which would just, be terrible for everyone over here in the short term as well?
I mean, I think
where's the balance?
Yeah, I mean, if the central idea is choice of the book is choice, and that is the central idea, it's not necessarily about decreasing China's control of this space. It's about increasing how we produce more of it in the United States, and what are the choices that we just broadly are thinking about where we want these building blocks. So, like a great example, for instance, one of the companies I profile in the book is Albemarle, world's largest lithium company, headquartered in North Carolina. It is spending massively to expand in the United States. It's got a project in North Carolina that it's an old mine that it's going to reopen. It's going to use direct lithium extraction in Arkansas. It operates the only U.S. lithium mine right now in Nevada, and its ambitions are pretty aggressive even beyond that. It also is growing pretty rapidly in China, world's largest EV market, world's largest processing market. And so can both things happen at the same time? It looks like they can and they will. But, abrogating China's prowess in this area does not necessarily mean decreasing their potential. It means us outside of China have to be deciding, okay, what are the choices we're going to make in order to maybe not be energy independent, but maybe more energy resilient, if that makes sense.
Where are some of the other cool places you traveled when you were writing the book?
So the book focuses mostly on proposed projects in the United States on purpose. So I wanted U.S. audiences to really have to grapple with this core idea of choice. So I mentioned Arizona and Nevada and Idaho. There's a huge chapter focusing on the proposed Twin Metals project in northern Minnesota on the U.S. border with Canada. That's a huge focus there.
What's that producing?
It's not producing right now.
No. What will it produce?
It will produce cobalt and nickel and some PGM metals and copper.
Okay.
It's an underground deposit. And if it were allowed to move forward, their concern from environmentalists is that the type of rock that contains those metals is called sulfide ore. And sulfide, when it's exposed to water, it can in some instances produce acid. And what's in northern Minnesota? The Great Lakes. And so the big concern is if there was an accident and you had this sulfide ore get into the Great Lake waterways and it went through all the Great Lakes, that you would have
Huge
all this
environmental
acid
concern.
that would flow
Disaster.
through there. And so the project, I'll let readers discover sort of what happens, but, the Biden administration has taken a very strong stance on the project, and that has caused a lot of concern among the unions in northern Minnesota that want these jobs. And it also has huge geopolitical implications because it would produce a lot of cobalt. But the biggest cobalt producer in the world right now is the DRC, Congo, and sometimes child labor can be used there. So it's a big concern for Elon Musk and others that don't want to use child labor, understandably, as part of their supply chain.
That's a huge concern. And DRC is the vast majority, but also almost one of the only cobalt producers in the world. I was thinking about going over to Africa for a trip. I want to go to Rwanda and Uganda to go gorilla trekking. And I was going to try to stop by the DRC. One of the people that works at EnergyX worked at one of these big cobalt mines.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In DRC. And so I asked him, like, hey, can I go check it out while I'm over there? And he goes, yeah, like, of course, let me talk to my old boss. I'll get it set up. And I was trying to look at flights from Rwanda to DRC, which is literally the neighboring country. It'd be like flying from Mexico to the US. There are literally no flights that go there because it's so dangerous.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I to me, that was the big eye opener. Like, I'm not really scared to go anywhere in the world. Like, maybe Venezuela. Like, I've heard a lot of bad things about Venezuela.
Yeah.
But Congo, the fact there's no flights that even go to the country, that was an eye opener.
My buddy just got back from the Congo.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's two Congos.
Okay, so the DRC is the dangerous one.
Yeah. There's the Republic of Congo, then there's the Democratic Republic of Congo.
The dangerous real Congo.
Yeah.
That's that real one.
How do you think that Congo plays a role in the energy transition moving forward?
It's a huge role. I mean, cobalt is a massive metal used across the electric vehicle supply chain and the lithium-ion battery sphere broadly. The DRC also produces a lot of copper, and there's been huge investments by Chinese companies all across the DRC into those areas. I chronicle in the book how an American company, Freeport-McMoRan, used to own the largest cobalt mine in the DRC, but had to sell it. A company got into financial dire straits and basically sold it to a Chinese company. And the U.S. government allowed this to happen and go forward. There were no other bidders. And so now this prized asset is owned by a Chinese company, and the safety standards are much lower than
all roads lead back to China.
They've been very transparent about Belt and Road, yes.
Yeah. So do you think that Congo is able to clean up this child labor problem? Or like, what if they do clean it up? Do you think that we still would stay away from that? Like, is it a perception thing or is it real? Like,
I think it's important for us all to first acknowledge that we know that it's there. I mean, I don't think there's enough transparency about this. There have been some great books and articles written about it. I highly recommend actually Cobalt Red, great book about the DRC's DRC's cobalt industry. But I also don't think it's sort of everyday knowledge. And so I think the more people know about it, the more that they can demand change and expect higher standards from manufacturers.
Yeah, everyone seems so disconnected. Like you were talking about, like, this is from, where is this from? Like, I feel like if people knew certain things that they use on a daily basis was from child labor, they would kind of like, stray away from it.
And or many manufacturers are saying we don't use child labor, which is great, but somebody is buying the cobalt.
Right. So
if every manufacturer says they don't use it, it sort of begs the question, do you understand your supply chain?
Mm-hmm.
So we as consumers need to demand more from the manufacturers that manufacture the products that we buy.
Yeah. Well, Ernie, dude, you have an extraordinary career to date, from starting your high school newspaper to releasing a best-selling Amazon book.
Thank you.
And everything in between, leading the energy transition beat at Reuters. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Hey, great to be with you both.
Yeah, appreciate it.